Well, the media and political establishment in this country, unsurprisingly, is still horny for war with Russia, but nobody in this country gets their rocks off more at the thought of death and destruction than Republican psychopath Lindsey Graham, who on national television said what they're all probably thinking in D.C.
What do you make of this overall strategy we're seeing from the administration, releasing this intelligence about possible invasions, saying imminent invasion, saying maybe there'll be a false flag operation? Do you think that maybe has been effective in pushing Putin back?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't want to ring alarm bell as much as take action. They're telling us the invasion is imminent, but they're not telling Putin with clarity what happens if you invade. He should be punished now. What I can't get over is that the world is allowing him to do all this without consequence. The guy took the Crimea in 2014. He's got 100,000 troops amassed on the Ukrainian border, and he's paying no price at all. So I'd like to hit him now for the provocation and have sanctions spelled out very clearly what happens to the ruble and his oil and gas economy. I think that's what's missing. We're talking way too much and we're doing too little.
Well, let's see what happens this week, Senator. Meantime, I do want to ask you, it's been several years since you've been on the program. So this is our first chance since the January 6th riots to ask about your relationship with President Trump and his leadership of the Republican Party.
Isn't it interesting how George Stephanopoulos just moved on, didn't ask for clarification? You know, if I were in that position, I would push him to clarify what he means. Senator, you said hit him now for the provocation. What do you mean by that specifically? You cited sanctions, so are you saying that we do sanctions now before he invades Ukraine, and then we make it very clear that we'll go to war with him if he does indeed invade? What are you saying? Because you're talking about this very flippantly when this is a serious issue, and you are in a position of power. So what you say currently, it makes a difference, and yet you're just casually talking about us needing to do less talk and more action. I mean, our media is so conditioned to support war, support whatever the State Department says and wants, that these things don't even register. It sounded like a United States senator just called for war with Russia, not necessarily explicitly, but he hinted at it. He wants more aggression. So how do you just move on to the next question after that? Lindsey Graham said they're telling us the invasion is imminent, but they're not telling Putin with clarity, them being the State Department and the Biden administration, what happens if you invade. He should be punished now. He should be punished now for the provocation. Okay, let me just ask this question to anyone in the establishment. Yes, it is the case that Putin and Russia, they are amassing troops on the border of Ukraine, but this is not new. It's not a new phenomenon. So why is it that this time it's a little bit more than geopolitical posturing, which is common globally speaking? I mean, when it comes to the United States and South Korea, whenever North Korea does regular nuclear weapons tests, we respond by doing war games near their border. We casually fly into Iranian airspace, allegedly, but then when Iran shoots down our drone because they likely see that as an act of aggression, well, we denied that we invaded their airspace in the first place, and then we subsequently accuse them of increasing aggression. So, I mean, a huge portion of international politics is theatric, and when Ukraine tells us that they're not fearing an imminent invasion from Russia, forgive me for being a little bit skeptical considering our government has lied to us before with respect to the question as to whether or not another country poses a threat. By the way, we never found those WMDs in Iraq, and yet we're still in Iraq till this day. So I'm sorry, I'm going to need more than the State Department's word that another country is planning to do something, because that hasn't gone very well for us in the past when we just took the US government at their word. So explain to us, why should we believe that the troop buildup this time is different than previous years when Russia put troops on the border? How is this not just more posturing? Why is it necessary that we escalate tensions currently? Now, to be fair, not everyone is trying to escalate. The Biden administration has kind of walked a fine line. They've been escalating tensions, making threats, but at the same time, they are having talks with Russia and Vladimir Putin, which is important. But the problem that I have with the mainstream media and our political establishment is that whenever we see this posturing from other countries, whenever they puff up their chests and they are aggressive, which is bad, by the way, to be clear, Russia doing that is bad. But, you know, we have to take that as a threat. But when we do it, when we posture, when we play war games near another country, that's not a threat. That's not evidence of imminent invasion because we're always the good guys. So, when I see this, my response is, why do we have to immediately resort to escalation? Why isn't the media all in unison calling for diplomacy, calling for peace? I mean, the implication whenever there's a situation like this is we have to invade. And if it's not because a country poses a threat, then the media will try to pull on your heartstrings and say, well, it's a humanitarian crisis and we can't stand idly by while this happens. Meanwhile, there is no war for purposes of humanitarian reasons. There's always some underlying motivating factor. Usually it's what the military-industrial complex wants, which is essentially a semi-autonomous entity in our government currently. So when we live in a late-stage capitalist society where war is profitable, I'm sorry, I don't buy anything you say. Show me evidence that this is actually serious this time, because Ukraine, they're saying we're not worried about an imminent invasion. Now, what's interesting is that after Lindsey Graham made that appearance, we learned that if we did take him at his word and we did what he said, well, we would have escalated further because guess what? Russia is withdrawing troops. So in the event, we listened to Lindsey Graham and we hit Putin, did sanctions preemptively, we would have escalated. Do you understand why it's really important that we don't always have our finger on the trigger whenever something happens, whenever another country is posturing? And look, I don't like any imperialism. Don't support U.S. imperialism. Don't support Russian imperialism. What they do in their geopolitical region, essentially it's intimidation. They're terrorizing these other countries, and that's awful. That's bad. Them building up troops is bad. Escalation, however, is also bad. The best response to aggression isn't always more aggression. Sometimes you approach it differently, diplomatically, or using soft power, not by just screeching at the top of your lungs for war, Lindsey Graham. So, if people like Lindsey Graham are so horny for war, if you want to be a little tough guy, go enlist. Go pick up a fucking gun and go to Ukraine, Lindsey Graham. See, it's easy for him to call for other people to fight and die when he's sitting in his mansion somewhere in DC, when he's just hanging out, doesn't really have to be bothered by it. Yeah, we should be tough. Okay, you be tough. Go to Russia or go to Ukraine. Go fight. You want to send other people to die? Not so easy if you're the one who's going to be on the front lines, Lindsey Graham. Now, Sam Sachs made an excellent point about this on Twitter. He said, I'm sorry, but I just can't buy the claim that Putin was about to start a generational war that would have come at great cost to his nation and likely toppled his government because he's a suicidal nut, but decided not to do it at the last second because the United States said don't. This isn't to let Russia off the hook for the shit it's been doing in Ukraine since 2014 and the recent show of force, but no one ever made a good argument for how Russia benefits from a disaster war and instead just ran with the State Department's caricature that Putin is a madman. I think the more interesting question is, did the U.S. State Department actually believe Putin would start an incredibly reckless war of regime change and occupation in Ukraine? Did it really think that? And if not, then what game has it been playing the last few weeks and months? Exactly. Sorry, but after you lied to your entire country about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction, we never trust you ever again. What's the saying? Fool me once, shame on me. What's the second part? W, can you help me out?
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
That's right. Can't get fooled again. So, no, I am not just going to instinctively opt for more aggression and escalation whenever we see other countries doing posturing that is very common globally. That's bad. Russia putting troops on the border in Ukraine is obviously intimidation. But when we see this posturing back and forth between countries, usually it's one responding to the other, one going tit for tat, and it's all bad. Really, what we should be doing is working with every single country to stop the real threat, which is anthropogenic climate change. But all of these leaders around the globe, everyone, they have their heads up their asses, and they're so primitive that they think that war is really the best interest for everyone. And these geopolitical pursuits are the best things for their country. Imperialism is the best thing. When, imperialism, all this shit doesn't matter if we don't have a habitable planet. So maybe they should focus on that, but of course not, because that would mean that we live in a sane world if that were the case. But we live in an insane world, so leaders are, very thirsty for war. We have a late-stage capitalist society where war is profitable, so our media apparatus and political establishment push for it at the behest of their defense contractor donors and advertisers. And this is why whenever we see a flare-up with Iran, with Russia, Venezuela, there's always this fear that, oh my God, will this be the time when they invade again? Sorry, you're going to have to provide me with more evidence. And even if you prove to me that another country is a threat, then you're going to have to give us a very good justification as to why all-out war is necessary.
Mike is a total shitlib. Once he started shilling for the DNC, I stopped watching. So I definitely won't be hitting the subscribe button or turning on notifications by clicking the bell. No way. It's very sad, I know.